Adesanya, excuse me, is he entering that Valentina Shevchenko territory? Is he entering that Amanda Nunes territory where now we're saying, oh, we got another guy, like, is this the real contender or is this another guy? And I don't want to be disrespectful to Jared Cannonier because this is a man right here who, listen, what he did to Derek Brunson in his last outing was very impressive. Not a lot of people can do that to him. What he did against Kelvin Gastelum, Jack Hermanson, right? He has big, big wins, but he's also advanced in age, 38 years old, brother. So let's talk about it. Is he a real contender or is this a placeholder until the UFC can then get their narrative through and get Alex Paeta a title shot? What do you think?
I mean, it seems like it's leading towards the latter, doesn't it? Jared Cannonier, older in age, but if you look back at this dude's story, man, starting off in Alaska, being a truck driver, driving, 12 to 18 hours, however many hours they drive up there, and still getting to the gym, starting off at heavyweight, dropping down through the divisions, and now you're finally facing the champ. This is what stories are made of, man. This is what the UFC is all about right here, is that narrative. But also at the same point, you got Paeta looming in the background. So I think as much as everybody's kind of counting out Jared Cannonier, I do think he's very much a game opponent for the champ, for Stylebender. Just in the way he does. Nobody handles Brunson like that. You know what I'm saying? Going back to one of his last fights, man, nobody does what Jared Cannonier does to Brunson in that kind of fashion. And if he can, get the wrestling going, get the pressure going, use his strength against Izzy, who knows? We might be able to see something because Jared Cannonier, at the end of the day, he's fought those 265ers, those 205ers, those bigger guys. So he's felt that kind of weight. And we saw what happened when Izzy went up and felt that kind of weight in 205 against Jan. And obviously Jan versus Jared Cannonier, maybe not the same level of wrestling, but the feeling of that person, the strength, the movement, you're not surprised by anything in there. And I think that's what gives Jared Cannonier his best advantage or way to victory, if you will. That kind of confidence is he's been in there with some big boys before. And if you go in, put the pressure on, get the wrestling going, it'd be interesting to see what Cannonier can get done. Now, on that other hand, Derek, Israel Adesanya, he says that he's most proud of his wrestling. He's worked on it like tenfold, whatever the case is. Do you think that's bravado or is that something that's actually happening? And are we going to see that put to action?
Well, you know what? I do think that there has to be something there. I do ultimately think that Israel Adesanya, ever since the exposure that the Jan Blachowicz fight gave him of his grappling and of his ground game, I think it's gone to show, I guess I should say, that he has an improved level there. So if any contender wants to come up here and wants to say, I'm just going to wrestle him and that's how I'm going to win, that's definitely a path. But his get-ups have been much improved, man. His ability to grab an underhook when he's pushed up against the cage and fight off the wrestling, fight off the shot at the hips. I mean, all of that stuff has been much improved. And given that he's already a glorious kickboxer, I think that just making him more and more well-rounded. I think he did say that at the end of the day, he wants to end his career knowing that he's done every technique that you can do imaginable. Like, he wants to be the most well-rounded fighter. So if he's not able to do those techniques, if he has to be one-dimensional, then he hasn't really lived the career that he wants to. So I don't think that there's too much bravado by Israel Adesanya, but at the end of the day, you have to find ways to motivate yourself as well. So whether that means I'll take whatever challenge you could bring me. If you want to make it grappling, we can grapple. If you want to kickbox, we can kickbox. But I do think that there's a little bit of gamesmanship to be had here, AJ. And the reason why is because if you look at Israel Adesanya's fight against Paulo Costa, this is one that I see being somewhat similar in this matchup against Jared Cannonier. Israel Adesanya is a master of footwork. That's the one thing that I think is going to give Cannonier some big, big problems here. Because if you notice, Cannonier, he does switch stances back and forth. He has massive, terrible leg kicks, and terrible in the best ways. Like, he just destroyed. Look at what he did to Anderson Silva, man. He just tore that dude up, finished him with leg kicks, right? But he's very flat-footed. He's just kind of stomping and, you know what I mean, just like walking you down and all that. Israel Adesanya, he's going to cut corners. He's going to throw a bunch of feints. He's going to make you impatient. So that's the question that I have here for you, AJ. If Jared Cannonier rests on his laurels a little bit and rests on his experience and his veteranship and says, I've been there with the big names and all that, right? And he tries to take it patient. Don't you think Israel Adesanya can just kind of easily, at distance, pick him apart for 5 rounds and get an easy decision? Like, that's, I think, the best path to victory, especially given Cannonier can knock you out with one shot. What do you think?
Well, and I think if Cannonier depends on that one-shot power, depends on that plotting, it depends on his normal style of fighting, it's basically just shooting fish in a barrel for Adesanya. The footwork he has and the style he brings to the fight, very, very challenging for somebody who's plotting around like that, fighting against somebody who's flowing, man.
Yeah, and I think that there are going to be holes there because Jared Cannonier, admittedly, when he switches stances, he gets very square in the middle. And Adesanya, all he does is take, very Anderson Silva-esque, take reads, take reads, take reads, and then once he gets a read on what you're doing, as soon as you make that transition, boom, that's when he pops in. That's when he throws that big right hand over the top. That's when he throws the question mark kick, you know what I mean? That's when he looks for the highlight reel because Israel Adesanya, it's fair to say he's a sniper, right? You know what I mean? Like, he's not the volume guy. He's the pick his shots methodically type of guy. But, I mean, let's be real, since you already brought it up, AJ, does Jared Cannonier say, I'm going to get you into the middle of the cage, I'm just going to shoot and try to hold you down for 5 rounds? Like, he doesn't have many takedowns on his entire resume. If you look at his last, 10 fights, maybe he has, 1 or 2 takedowns. So do you think that's the game plan, or do you do what got you to the dance, which is rely on that one-shot power and knock your opponents out?
Man, I think you have to go with the wrestling personally, and that's what I have for Jared Cannonier. Yeah. Will the wrestling come into play? I think so, because if you're depending on one shot against a sniper who can also hit you with that one shot, and all you do is overextend, and he's already slipped, and you see him looking at you, you know, like, oh, this dude's about to crack. As much as I think the right hand could come into play for Jared Cannonier, I think it's going to be better for him to wrestle his way in, something close. And when you have Izzy thinking about the wrestling, then you drop back to your original game plan. Maybe you can land something, but uphill battle for Cannonier nonetheless.
Brother, what a story would it be if Cannonier is the guy to dethrone Izzy? I mean, Yoel Romero couldn't do it. Costa couldn't do it. Vittori couldn't do it. Whitaker twice couldn't do it. Like, if Cannonier is the guy, that'd be an incredible story. But I guess the last thing that I want to take, before we talk about props, is that Israel Adesanya is very smart and very patient. And he has this method of allowing Cannonier or any one of his opponents to fall on their shield. And what that means is that, or I fall on their sword, excuse me. What I mean by that is that they'll get so impatient, they'll rush in on Izzy because Izzy will just sit back, pick you apart at distance. They'll rush in on him, and that's when he'll then open up for those counter strikes. So he's saying, I'm going to let you fall on your own sword. I'm going to let impatience literally kill you in this fight because I'm going to make you fight my fight. And I think that's more or less how Stylebender is able to corral his opponents. Let's not forget, 6'4" is Adesanya, 5'11" is Cannonier, 80-inch reach for Adesanya, 77.5-inch reach for Cannonier. So that 3-inch reach advantage is going to play a part. But let's talk about it now, AJ. So TKO prop for Israel Adesanya, plus 160. Guess what it is for Jared Cannonier, but the plus 500. Now, that's a little ridiculous, right? Because if there's one way for Cannonier to win, that's probably the way, right? So what the odds makers, I mean, they're giving long shots for Cannonier. Even for a decision prop, it's plus 650. So plus 500 for a TKO, plus 650 for a decision, and plus 2,000 for a submission. They're giving Cannonier no shot. If you're a fan of Cannonier and you're a betting man, which clearly you are if you're tuning into this program, what do you think about that plus 500 for the TKO? That's the method to victory. That's the path to victory. What do you think?
That's the path for Jared, man. I think, and it's crazy that that's the best odds he has to winning is a plus 500 TKO. But I mean, still, he has the power; he can get it done. So I see where the odds makers are coming from, though. I do see it.
But if you're a betting man, do you just say, okay, well, just give me the plus 320 money line? Like, what are we talking about here? Like, why? You know what I mean? Like, because if it's plus 500 for a TKO, plus 320 for any method of victory. I mean, who's to say, man, that we couldn't? What if he gets how many submissions does he have? 2 submissions? Who's to say he couldn't? I don't know, bro. That's not going to happen. But come on.
Maybe. I mean, I don't see Izzy putting himself in a position to get submitted. You know what I'm saying? If they're going to be wrestling, I think it's going to be Jared Cannonier just on top holding him down. But I don't know.
What's crazy is we didn't see Yuri Prohashka submitting Glover Teixeira neither, and it happened, brother. So that's what I'm saying. You have to take these things into account. Lastly, Israel Adesanya. Let's talk about it. Clearly, if you saw the TLDR, you know we're picking with and still with the champion here. Plus 160 for the TKO, plus 125 for the decision, and plus 1,400 for the submission. What do you like there, brother?
Man, they're really taking that decision as the best one. I'm gonna go decision as well. Yeah. Something tells me Izzy likes Cannonier in there so much that he's not just gonna absolutely put him, through the ringer. Like he's gonna have a match instead of a fight, if you know what I mean. And I could be wrong. Hopefully I'm wrong. We might see some fireworks in there, and Izzy might get the ego going and actually put Cannonier to sleep. But I'm going to go decision just because I think it's, have you ever fought your friend in there and you're putting it to him, you're working him, you're like, all right, I'm going to do a little easy. But at the same point, that's how you get knocked down in the big game. So who knows? I'm going Izzy by decision. What about you, Derek?
Okay, no, that is, man. I'm rocking with the decision there, and I can relate with that from a jiu-jitsu sense, right? I guess from boxing too, but from a jiu-jitsu sense, I've actually fought teammates in tournaments. You know what I mean? It's just not the same. You don't have the same level of intensity, right? But that is how you get hurt. You're right about that. So yeah, I like the over. I like the decision here from Israel Adesanya because, like I said, I see this as being like a Paulo Costa fight all over again. I just think Jared Cannonier won't do what Costa did, which is rush in all aggressively and taunt and do all that crazy stuff. I think he's going to sit there, pick him apart, try to pick him apart with the leg kicks. We'll see who wins that battle. But ultimately, I think the decision is the best play because if you think about the only two people that Israel Adesanya has finished in his last 5 fights for title defenses, right, or title matches, it's Robert Whittaker and Paulo Costa. And I guess the Whittaker one was over 5 fights ago. So I think in his whole title reign, it's just been Costa and Whittaker, the only people he's finished. Decisions all across the board. I think it's a very safe bet. And with that being said, Israel Adesanya and still. But that's not even the people's main event, man.